Folk who claim intelligence must know about it, and that knowledge must be based on observation and fact, and not be a matter of emotion or wishful thinking. I have studied socialism in college and by reading and also by travel. I knew the work of the Social Democratic Party in Germany in the last decade of the 19th century. I saw what is now Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia before the Russian Revolution. I saw Western Europe before the First World War and learned of the rise of socialism. Between the world wars, I lived in Germany and visited the Soviet Union, China, and Japan. And last year, I spent 11 months in Britain, Holland, and France, in Czechoslovakia, Germany, and the Soviet Union, and in China. All this study and travel does not give me complete knowledge of these great lands with their wide territory and teeming masses of folk. But this experience does give me the right to say that the West, and particularly the United States, can no longer ignore the world or consider themselves the center of the universe. That Eastern Europe and Asia have forged forward at a tremendous rate, that the Middle East and Africa are awakening, and that what this part of the world, together with the West Indies and South America, are thinking and doing in the present is of interest to you and fatal for the future of this nation. What does a socialist country look and feel like? It is not so different from this. The people are ordinary folk. They are not in chains. They laugh and cry. They work and rest. There are homes and schools. Life goes on there about the same as everywhere. Of course, time and observation reveal differences. The long look would distinguish Moscow from Boston. There is more planning of street and building in Moscow. The people in New York are dressed in later style, but the Muscovites are not in rags. They are satisfied with life and less worried than Bostonians. They rest and play, but with less noise. A stroll in the squares or a walk in the park seems to satisfy the mass of people. One thing they fear, which we do not, and that is war. They know what war is, what it costs in death and destruction, dislocation of life, disease and hurt. This is true not only in the Soviet Union and Poland, but in England and France. The world fears war, except the United States. We laugh and joke about it. Our children play at murder. We have no active peace movement. On the other hand, in socialist countries, certain fears are absent, which never leave the waking hours of Western lands, nor always the hours of sleep. They are four in number: unemployment, old age, sickness, opportunity to rest. Take any man you know, any man you meet, take yourself. We fear unemployment, losing our job, being unable to work. This the socialist citizen does not fear. He may have to change work. He may have to change the place of work. But work at current pay, of this he is always sure. We fear old age, what we will do when we are old. We are desperate to save enough to ensure a decent living when we are too old to earn. Thousands of people walk our streets sick with the fear of age. the citizens of socialist countries need not fear age. Every citizen is certain of support, of food, shelter, and clothes as long as he lives. It may not be of the highest quality or what he would prefer, but he will not freeze nor starve. We are frightened of sickness and accident, an attack of sore disease, being knocked over by a car. Any day, any time, we may be put to bed by such misadventure. We may be covered by insurance, but most people are not. We can seldom afford the best medical care, and we nearly always lose pay and burden our family and friends if sick. In socialist countries, medical care is given great attention. Physicians are being rapidly increased in number and distributed according to need, even if that need is in some lonesome country district or in a far-off province or late at night. Medical care is available for all. Of course, everybody cannot get the best, but none are neglected. All workers need rest, but how many dare take it? Some provision for vacation is made today, but most workers do not get adequate recreation and can hardly afford what they take. In socialist lands, the vacation with pay is part of the work contract. The vacation will not be at a fashionable resort. It may not be what the worker would choose, but it will be rest with medical care, with food and recreation. These four fears which haunt capitalist lands are met full-faced and answered in socialist lands. The systems are not perfect. They break down here and there and now and then, but they are so successful that socialism persists and spreads. Even the Tories in England have not dared to abolish social medicine. This kind of help and rescue stands first in the minds of the supporters of socialism. They will endure much before they will surrender this freedom from daily and continuous fear, a freedom which leaves them liable to unemployment, to neglect in sickness and old age, and work without rest, does not attract them once they find a regime which has a cure for this, even when the cure is imperfect. They are content with low wage if relieved of these fears. Then there's a problem of children. The loss of time, the pain and discomfort of their birth, the time and money needed for their upbringing, the question of their education and life employment. Many people refuse to procreate children because of these problems, so difficult to solve in capitalist lands with individual initiative. Few men of ambition can afford to marry before they are 40 or 50 years of age. But in socialist lands, the problem of children comes first. The working mother has rest time with pay during pregnancy. She has care for her child during infancy. The child is in nursery and kindergarten when small, and in school as he grows. He has higher education with pay for school attendance. And as he becomes of age, free training for earning a living is open to him according to talent. All this program is not perfect. School facilities lag. Social programs, school programs go wrong. Monies are wasted. All this and more. Yet the school systems of socialist lands outstrip the systems of Western Europe and of the United States. And it is admitted that the schools of the Soviet Union are the best in the world. See what a wealth of human ability the socialist lands are preserving and using for humanity, and see why they have no juvenile delinquency. All this effort costs in energy, in freedom of action, in individual training. It means discipline. It means that a man does not do what he wants to do always, but in many cases what he is told to do. But is this situation much different in capitalist lands? Are we free in America to do what we please? Are Frenchmen free to do what they please? Of course not. In a world of natural law, in a world of human legislation, in a world of habit and inherited culture patterns, the area of human freedom of action must be seriously curtailed. But it is further narrowed when industry, ownership of property, and distribution of income is directed by the owners of capital goods and by the men who own or control the labor of human beings. The question is not whether there will be discipline, but rather who shall administer it and under what control will most and essential freedoms be conserved. The anarchy of individual wish and rule of chance is inadmissible, just as complete slavery is unthinkable. Discipline involves planning, and planning is absolutely necessary for modern industry. We may not deceive ourselves by assuming that the industry of the United States and Western Europe is not planned. It is planned, and most elaborately. But who plans it, and for what ends? It is planned by the owners of capital and for the individual profit which the enterprises bring. This may lead to much prosperity, but it also may lead to financial crises, to wealth and poverty, exploitation and unemployment, and crime. Socialism, on the contrary, tries to plan for the general welfare of all citizens. It owns the wealth used for industry. It controls the labor which produces wealth and seeks to distribute property according to need, not by chance, inheritance, smart action, or force. This kind of planning is not easy. It involves large numbers of men working in unison with ability, high moral standards, and willingness to sacrifice. We used to say that while the objects of socialism were laudable, human nature was too selfish, ignorant, and criminal to achieve this end. This is a question not to be answered by theory, but only by experience. I have watched the Russian experiment in planning for 30 years. I have seen no other modern nation which has brought into service for the state and its welfare so much ability, devotion, and understanding as the Soviet Union, and this in the midst of poverty, war, aggression, treachery, and deliberate lying. It has organized, developed, and carried on industry. It has furnished food, homes, and clothing for its millions. It has raised its standard of living and put all its children in school, and schools of superlative efficiency. It has made extraordinary progress in science and literature. The people of the Soviet Union are not as rich as Americans, or as British, or as the French, but they are more hopeful, with less nervous tension and less crime. They look forward with confidence to a great and happy future. One other thing Russian socialism has done, which seems to me of paramount importance. It has attacked frankly and face forward religious dogmatism. It has made it illegal for any church to teach religious dogmas to school children. Grown folk may organize and conduct religious exercises, provided they do not interfere with the functions of the state in education, in politics, in employment. It is permissible in the Soviet Union to be an atheist and to study the reasons for such a belief. Reviewing the history of mankind, I think this is one of the greatest forward steps taken by any nation. China is even more astonishing than the Soviet Union because of its long history, the conquest, insult, exploitation, and degradation which it has suffered, and the recent leap forward of 680 million people under a socialism which, sooner than in any other nation today, is likely to achieve complete communism. I saw China for a week or so in 1936, and for 10 weeks in 1959. The contrast in that short time was amazing. But even this was as nothing to the transformation of the Chinese in the last 1,000 years. China refutes all our theories of inferior peoples, all our effort to rule the majority of men by imperial exploitation for the benefit of the white world. When I was in school and college, the American contempt for the Chinese was supreme. They were a queer, contradictory, illogical folk. Even if they invented the compass and movable printing type, they deserved no credit. These were not inventions until whites made them. China was ready for complete dismemberment by Europe as soon as the white nations could agree as to their shares. Meantime, in China in 1936, the whole country was under the heel of Europe and America. Shanghai was the home of prostitutes and gamblers along with rich businessmen. The Chinese leaders were writhing desperately. I was completely at sea in my attempt to understand China and Japan, the United States and the Soviet Union. Sun Yat-sen had appealed in vain for help. Only the Soviet Union had responded. And I saw there in 1926 the desperate effort to train Chinese leaders in Moscow. When I returned in 1959, China had been revolutionized. China belonged to China, and the white masters were gone. The Chinese multi-millions were at work. They were laughing and sweating. Women had an equality with men such as America could not duplicate. Agriculture and industry were rushing forward. Literature and art were living again. I have traveled widely on this earth since my first trip to Europe 67 years ago. Except South America and India, I have seen most of the civilized world and much of its backward regions. Many leading nations I have visited repeatedly, but I have never seen a nation which so amazed and touched me as China in 1959. There I traveled 5,000 miles by railway, boat, and auto. I saw all the great cities: Peking, Shanghai, Hankow and its sisters, Canton, Chongqing, Chengdu, Kunming, and Nanking. I rode its vast rivers, passed through its villages, and sat in its communes. I visited its schools and colleges, and lectured and broadcast to the world. I visited its minority groups. I spent 4 hours with Mao Zedong and dined twice with Chu Enlai, the tireless prime minister of this nation of 680 million souls. What is the secret of China in the second half of the 20th century? It is that the vast majority of near 1 billion human beings have been convinced that human nature in some of its darkest recesses can be changed if change is necessary. China knows, as no other people know, to what depths human meanness can go. I used to weep for American Negroes as I saw through what indignities and repressions and cruelties they had passed. But as I read Chinese history in these last months and had it explained to me stripped of Anglo-Saxon lies, I know no depths of Negro slavery in America which have plumbed such abysses as the Chinese have seen for 2,000 years. They have seen starvation and murder, rape and prostitution, sale and slavery of children, and religion cloaked in opium and gin for converting the heathen. This oppression and contempt came not only from Tartars and Mongolians and British, French, Germans, and Americans, but from Chinese themselves, from mandarins and warlords, from capitalists and murdering thieves like Chiang Kai-shek, from Kuomintang socialism, and intellectuals educated abroad. Despite all this, China lives and has been transformed and marches on. She is not ignored by the United States. She ignores the United States and leaps forward. What did it? What furnished the motive power, and how was it applied? First, it was the belief in himself and in his people of a man like Sun Yat-sen. He plunged on blind and unaided. He was repulsed by Britain and America, but welcomed by Russia. Then efforts toward socialism, which wobbled forward, erred and lost, and at last, bribed by America and Britain and betrayed by Chiang Kai-shek, with its leaders murdered and its aims misunderstood when not deliberately misrepresented. Then came the long march from feudalism past capitalism and socialism to communism in our day. Mao Zedong, Chu Enlai, Chu Te, and a half dozen others undertook to lead a nation by example, by starving and fighting, by infinite patience, and above all, by making a nation believe that the people, and not merely the elite, that on the contrary, the workers in factory, street and field, composed the real nation. Others have said this often, but no nation has tried it like the Soviet Union and China. And on the staggering and bitter effort of the Soviets, beleaguered by all Western civilization, and yet far-seeing enough to help weaker China even before a still weak Russia was safe. On this vast pyramid has arisen the saving nation of this stumbling, murdering, hating world. In China, the people, the laboring people, the people who in most lands are the doormats on which the reigning thieves and murdering rulers walk, leading their painted and jeweled prostitutes. The people walk and boast. These people of the slums and gutters and kitchens are the Chinese nation today. This the Chinese believe, and on this belief they toil and sweat and cheer. China has no rank nor classes. Her universities grant no degrees. Her government awards no medals. She has no blue book of society, but she has leaders of learning and genius, scientists of renown, artisans of skill, and millions who know and believe this and follow where these men lead. This is the joy of this nation, its high belief and unfaltering hope. China is no utopia. Fifth Avenue has better shops where the rich parade. Detroit has more and better cars. The best American housing outstrips the Chinese, and Chinese women are not nearly as well dressed as the guests of the Waldorf Astoria. But the Chinese worker is happy. He has exorcised the great fear that haunts the West, the fear of losing his job, the fear of falling sick, the fear of accident, the fear of inability to educate his children, the fear of daring to take a vacation. To guard against such catastrophe, Americans skimp and save, cheat and steal, gamble and aim at murder. The Soviet citizen, the Czech, the Pole, the Hungarian have kicked out the stooges of America and the hoodlums set to exploit the peasants. They and the East Germans no longer fear these disasters. And above all, the Chinese sit high above these fears and laugh with joy. They will not be rich in old age, but they will eat. They will not enjoy sickness, but they will be given care. They will not starve as thousands of Chinese did only a generation ago. They fear neither flood nor epidemic. They do not even fear war. As Mao Zedong told me, war for China is a paper tiger. China can defend itself, and back of China stands the unassailable might of the Soviet Union. The reason for this is socialism, aiming straight toward communism and transforming a great nation. Every American should visit China. It is nothing less than idiotic to deprive a nation which pretends to be intelligent from learning about the greatest socialist nation of the world by seeing and not by being forced to believe the lies that come from Hong Kong. In Germany, where I visited my old university, in Czechoslovakia and Poland, I saw socialism progressing, but fighting the West, especially the United States, which tore Germany into two parts after the Second World War, in which the Soviet Union won the victory for the West. In the nation of Czechs and Slovaks, which we thought we would dominate, but failed, and even in Poland, where the Roman Catholic Church is fighting socialism in vain, in all these countries is peace, and more than that, confidence in the future. That is not all. Socialists of the Orthodox school call nothing by the name socialism, which does not base itself on the ownership of capital by the state and on planning a welfare state. But many folk who do not accept socialism favor and adopt socialist methods in carrying on work and welfare. These, the Orthodox socialists claim, will fail if private capitalism is retained. Nevertheless, the imitation is flattering. For instance, in Scandinavia, the state housing, the social medicine, and the pension systems herald an approach toward complete socialism. And in Britain and right here in America, the increased function of the state in transportation, in water power, in pensions, in education, in housing and relief show our approach to socialism and the growing battle to retain these efforts before the assault of private capitalism in the guise of war and defense. This shows all thinking men that the world today faces socialism and communism. They are not matters of crime and conspiracy. They represent social revolution just as significant as universal suffrage and public education were in the past, and as Negro equality still is, especially in the United States. Few people change their minds on matters of national and human importance after they are grown. Some boast of this, but in reality it is tragic. It means that progress must often come by revolution instead of by peaceful reason. The case of Hitler illustrates this point. The Nazi state adopted every method of socialism but one. I was astonished in 1936 to see in Germany such frank imitation of what I had seen in the Soviet Union 10 years before. State roads and state housing, state pensions, planned employment, state education. It almost seemed that the program of the Social Democrats, which I had listened to in 1893 in Berlin, had come miraculously into being. But there was one fatal flaw. The state was controlled by a conscienceless dictator, and that dictator was owned by the worst corporations in the world. The final end was inevitable. Today, then, in this great change to socialism, it is of importance that every intelligent citizen try to learn and not simply rejoice in standing still. Visit socialism in its homes. You will not quickly understand how it works, but you will see the kind of person who is working it. And he will be singularly like you, human, ambitious, impatient of entrenched evil, panting for peace, goodwill toward men.